And here we are, folks, back in episode 20 of this Silly Goose Gang podcast. And we are joined by Dr. Martin Pepper, a geologist, presenter of History Channels Atlantis Found, finalist in Search for a New Mythbuster, just telling us that you've been in the Amazon jungle for the Curse of Akakum, was it?
Akakor, yeah, a Facebook watch series.
Facebook watch series. So thank you very much for joining us tonight and giving us this time. Ah, nice. And loving the workshop in the background as well. We're just talking briefly off air there that it just looks cool.
Thanks. Yeah, on my weekends, this is where I'm at. So completely covered in dirt, trying to work on about 100 different projects.
This is cool. Anything in particular that's interesting or exciting for yourself?
Well, I don't know if you can see behind me, but I've got some sea kayaks up hanging on the wall. Got some parts of an ultralight aircraft. I used to fly airplanes till I almost killed myself, which totally different story. But the rudder that I blew off of the thing there. Model airplanes. I do everything. You know, I've got whole welding and machining behind the camera, and then all wood shop over here. So I can never sit still.
So are you just taking something, trying to modify it to better it, and then playing with it, and then trying to modify it some more, or what are you trying to create new things, or?
Well, I think it comes down to the fact that I'm just cheap. So if it's cheaper to modify it, then I'll do that. But if I have to reinvent, because I've made a lot of inventions that just don't exist. So when that happens, I'll start from the ground, run to our scrapyard, buy some materials by the pound, and then, start machining and working from there. Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I do like some making stuff from parts. It's something extremely satisfying about getting some bits and making into something.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So the Facebook thing. I'm interested in that right from the get go. That you've just finished. So what I'm assuming, is it something to do with a curse or?
Yeah, so what that all stems from a book that was written, I think, back in the 80s. The book's title was Curse of Akakor, and it was about how this supposed indigenous guy came out of the middle of the rainforest, and this was over in Brazil, and he came from a lost tribe. He befriended this German journalist, and the German wrote basically word for word what this guy claimed to be. And then the book became famous, and this was in the 80s. And so a famous book got all of these kids interested in trying to find this lost city that this guy was from. And so what he would do is he would get these young kids by, pen pals back in the day when it was pencil and paper. And he would convince them, like, hey, if you want to really see this lost city, you're going to want to live here. So bring your life savings. And then he'd get them out in the middle of the rainforest and pop them in the back of the head. So he killed a few of them. Stole their life savings, allegedly. We can't say anything because it's very hard to prove all this. But as soon as one of these kids would disappear, he'd buy something new with the exact same total. So one kid disappeared and he bought himself a new boat. Another person disappeared and he bought himself a house, kind of thing. So the idea was that Facebook put together this crew, kind of starting with Irish journalist Paul Connolly. And so we amassed this crew that was going to basically go out into the Amazon jungle, all the way from over to Peru to up in Brazil. We're going to actually try and find signs. And then also with some detective work and this retired FBI agent, guy by the name of Bobby Chacon, we're going to actually try and look into these murders. My job as a geologist was to look at some of these things that they claimed were possibly part of a lost city. And as a geologist, I basically teased them apart. Is this natural? Is it man-made? And where we go from there. So it was about 8 weeks in the jungle, just trekking around, trying to find signs, both of the murders and both of this lost city. So it was epic.
Yeah, that sounds super cool.
Thanks.
Now, did you do any prior training to being in the rainforest, or any survival stuff, or is this stuff you already have, or?
Well, I wasn't. We had some survival experts as well, like Megan Hine, who works with what's the big huge? This is stupid. I'm forgetting it, but the Special Forces UK. What's the big guy?
Bear Grylls.
Bear Grylls. Yeah. So
Bear Grylls.
she assists Bear Grylls, And then we also had a rainforest medicine medic helicopter pilot from Brazil.
Oh, okay.
Was a real big star as well. And that was it's a Sunday hot morning. I can't forget it, or I can't remember anything. But so we basically put this crew together, and so each person had their own specialty. So we had survival people, we had an FBI agent, we had a journalist, we had a Brendan Edwards, who was our tech expert. So all these people came together to try and solve this mystery.
Yeah, I know there's been quite a lot of stories of lost cities and civilizations and all sorts in the Amazon. So yeah, I'm definitely going to have to go and see this and watch the whole thing. It's something that's quite interesting.
Yeah, like there's all those, the lost city of Z, and then, you know, all the Incan artifacts, and, you know, in Peru you get the crazy stuff all the way to the Machu Picchu. So it was epic trying to basically go pre-Incan for any of these other cultures that might have been out there. Yeah.
Do you any intention of going back to find anything else?
There's talks. Facebook has kind of changed their direction, and so we're talking with other channels about possibly either re-airing it or going for a second season. But it really has to be kind of the perfect thing that has a little bit of all these different, you know, the side of some sort of murder mystery, some side of extreme trekking, you know, and hopefully some natural sciences as well. So we've been trying to think of the next place, but to get all those aspects in there is quite difficult.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
I can imagine it would be. The Lost Cities is one that I've read into a little bit. That would be a cool one to go and metaphorically dig back into as well. So, yeah.
The big struggle, though, is to really do this stuff, you need the latest tech. But you put the latest tech with the humidity of the rainforest and the remoteness, and everything breaks. And it's insane amounts of money. Like, I forget what it was, but we were paying like over $1,000 a minute to try and do Skype, you know, to try and Skype a visiting researcher, somebody to help us develop maps, or, you know, it was just, and to get out to these places, we had, you know, we hired the local indigenous, and the same indigenous for some of these areas that caused certain parties to be missing all the way back to the lost city of Z. So we befriended these people, we buy them generators and food, and then they would take us way upriver in these dugouts, trying to find any signs. So yeah, it was an intense journey.
Yeah, definitely sounds it. It's been quite incredible to be a part of, even with all the difficulties. I suppose like anything with that, you know, the difficulties make the good moments all that sweeter, I would imagine.
They make them sweet, but like there was one part that's in the series where we went way upriver to look at this possible artifact, and I think this was going to be our best chance at finding a clue. And then literally that night, a rainforest hit, and it was like a toilet just flushed down this canyon and started taking all our boats, started taking all the people in our crew just downriver in the middle of the night. So it's nice, but it's also scary, because in a moment like that, you lose anybody, there's no way to find them. We tried to look into get a search helicopter in Peru, and that was like, it was crazy money, like $10,000 an hour or something. I forget what it was, but just, there's no options when you're there. Like, you're just, unless you have unlimited supply of money, it's tough to do anything with.
I'm not entirely sure a search helicopter in the Amazon rainforest would do much.
Right, exactly. It's just crazy solid green curtain. Yeah.
So the thing that I'm excited to talk to you about, Martin, is the Atlantis stuff.
Yeah.
So why just right from the get-go, why do you think it's one of these it's probably the most intriguing thing to most people? So everybody's heard of Atlantis.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so intriguing to people?
Well, I think for one, you know, and this is where you get into a lot of weird gray areas. For one, you know, Plato's accounts make this thing sound so far advanced that then other people want to throw in extraterrestrial, you know, and all this other crazy stuff. So it's basically, it gets as rich as anybody's personal imagination, which I've found after doing that show, there's some pretty crazy people out there with gnarly imaginations who actually look me up. I've had people, I'm not exaggerating, I've had 5 different guys send me their entire life clippings and how it revolved around their own search for Atlantis. So Plato spun it up. Back in the day, he was trying to sell copies just like any other author is today. So he made this advanced civilization sound even beyond that. And so from his accounts, I think everybody else has just run wild with it. And so it's turned into this, everybody's own personal hunt. So I think it's become a real buzzword that everybody wants to try and take part in.
I know. I've watched so many things on Atlantis, and some of them are on Ancient Aliens.
Yeah.
It's not even that. Most of the things on that show, have super skeptical thoughts about them. But yeah, they're still fun. They're still fun.
Yeah.
So we didn't look you up because we're crazy. It's just interesting.
Don't be sending me your life story.
I promise you. I'm not sending you anything. Not sending you anything. But yeah, so there's been so many. So what took you to Santorini? What made you think of go to Santorini in the first place? What was the idea behind that?
Well, the first thing you got to realize, it was written by Plato, right? So you can't go beyond what Plato's time understood or knew. So you really had to kind of stay focused in the Mediterranean. Santorini, geologically, is one of the only places that erupted around the same time that would have ties, to the entire Mediterranean. And so it just seems like the obvious place, because barely anybody was traveling out past the Strait of Gibraltar to see anything else out there. So, and let alone would that make its story back to Plato. So I think Santorini was the best place in terms of just the general geology of it, plus how it looked. Like we were able to kind of go back in time and stitch what it looked like together before the eruption, and it fits all Plato's descriptions. So to me, that was the place, because it was right in the middle of the Mediterranean. So whatever happens there is going to send not only physical shock waves, but also, folklore and everything else outwards from there. And so it just makes perfect sense.
Yeah. No, we both myself and Chris have seen the documentary, and it definitely is intriguing. How big an eruption was the eruption on Santorini?
Well, to give you kind of a scale, it was so big that it literally blew the center of the island completely gone. And there were some civilizations that were, way out on the flanks. And we actually visit one of those in the film, where you get to see that the thing was basically covered, completely covered with a pyroclastic flow. So it was essentially big enough to blow itself completely out of existence. And anything else that was left there, it was completely covered. So kind of like Herculaneum, something that we really knew nothing about until people kind of accidentally stumbled upon it all.
Okay, that's
big.
And and even in the little demo you see where I do the the sand pile on the glove.
Yeah.
If you're sitting on top of the sand pile, or you're sitting on this volcano, you're literally going to be that whole mountain is going to be turned upside down. So you got to imagine that if you're on top of that, at best luck, you're going to be 50 miles below it underneath a huge pile of rubble, or you're going to be completely blown out of there, sent 50 miles out to sea, which nobody can survive, kind of thing.
So how deep are the waters, around about Santorini, around about this area? How, are the waters super deep, or
if I remember correctly, it's been a while, but it's around 100 meters, kind of in that area. The Mediterranean doesn't get super deep because it's essentially a closed area.
Yeah.
The one thing that does allow it to get deep geologically is that you have all these subducting oceanic slabs that are trying to go back down into Earth's mantle, like 1,000 feet or 1,000 miles down, kind of thing. So when you do have subduction, that slab is going to start pulling the bottom of the ocean with it. So the deepest places we have on Earth are these subducting areas, like the Marianas Trench, for instance, over in the Pacific, is where you have the Pacific plate subducting underneath another plate. So you will have some of this depth in the Mediterranean, but meanwhile, you have all these rivers feeding into it that are going to keep sediment kind of piling back up in the low zone.
Yeah, so it would still be super easy to lose things.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Especially in an eruption, you basically blanket that whole area with ash. So it's very difficult to get any kind of forensics on an area unless it's been really far away from the actual eruption. One of the shows we did for the How the Earth Works, we went to Indonesia to look at Krakatoa. And so that erupted in 1883. And so if you get away from that eruption, you can actually see the perfect sequence of eruptive events. So it's pretty fascinating. But this is a ways from the actual eruption. You can actually see a carbon layer from where the entire rainforest was burned from the heat. And then on top of that, you get to see a pumice layer so big. You know, it's almost like a the geology version of styrofoam, you know, super light but rock, you know, bouldery. So and then on top of that, you get the finer grain, and then on top of that, you finally get the thin ash. But, you know, this is like 60 miles from the eruption. So when we talk about Santorini, you know, that island is something like 10, 20 miles in diameter. So the whole area is completely, I mean, it was like an atomic bomb went off in the area.
Do you have any hope of one day, you know, is there a possible of, you know, like another eruption would bring things to the surface, or, you know, anything underwater that would, is there any hope for anything like that you could get some real concrete physical evidence?
Yeah, so my real job, it's not here. My real job is actually in a laboratory. So we look at isotopes of different elements. You know, the big one we look at is different isotopes of uranium and different isotopes of lead. And we can actually figure out the ages of rocks. Yeah. And we use basically a laser to ablate, or literally blow the mineral into dust. And then we looked at that dust in a mass spectrometer. So it goes from a laser beam through a plasma arc into a mass spectrometer, and it's extremely sensitive. And so we can look at, and I'm not exaggerating here, we can look at 20 micron diameter pieces of dust and tell you exactly how old it was when it formed, millions of years ago. And so one of the arguments I was doing when they asked me to do this show was, they said, what would you do if you were in this case? And I was like, I'd look at isotopes, because if you go to the right area, you know, when you actually model an eruption, you could probably figure out where one of these civilizations were on top of the eruption. And looking at isotopes, you could actually track times, you could track how many people were there, you could track anything you wanted, because it's so sensitive. So I think with the right technology and the right questions, you know, we could really uncover where this possible Atlantis was.
Yeah. I know, obviously, with what we've been seeing in the documentary, but you definitely don't think it's a parable or an allegory for, you know, an idealized society. We definitely are in agreement that kind of did exist.
Well, yes and no. And, you know, and this is where you got to put your kind of own filter on things. It was advanced. It's almost advanced, like, you know, I'm sure you guys have flown a lot around the world, but when you hit like a hub of transportation, like a big airport, or just like, for instance, in the US, excuse me, like Los Angeles, you know, it's a shipping hub, it's a flight hub. And so Los Angeles, like Tokyo or these other places around the world, are where the best technology is going, because you have to go through those areas to transport anything anywhere, from people to products to even information. So Atlantis was that. You know, if you look at Plato's description, it was a hub of commerce. And so it was advanced locally and at the time, but compared to what we think is advanced, it was not at all. You know, it was just steps ahead of the time's advancements. But, you know, and that's just because it was in the main shipping channel. So I see, yes, positively, it was an advanced society, as advanced as it could be, you know, thousands of years ago. I don't think aliens were involved. I don't think it was some underwater city with this perfect glass sphere, which other people have written to me about.
It ruined all my dreams, Martin.
I'm sorry. But like, for instance, I don't know, have you guys ever gone to Tokyo?
No.
It would blow you away. Like, I was almost taken hostage by a toilet in the Tokyo airport because the things have these automatic lid openers. The seats are warm. They have a butt sprayer. They have a hand washer. Like, they're so beyond my comprehension of what a toilet should be that I couldn't get out of the thing. You know, like an automatic bathroom door opener, I hit the wrong button and told the toilet I was female, and parts of me got washed I didn't want. So I can see how certain people see this as so far advanced that aliens have to have something to do with it, when really it's just the most technologically advanced country in the world has the most crazy toilets I've ever seen. So I hope this kind of makes sense to people, that I'm sure that they were beyond other cultures, but not that far compared to what we would know.
I think when it comes to people going, you know, whatever you look at, whatever historical site you look at, I think it's easier for people to say it must be aliens rather than saying I have no fucking understanding of what this is. It's just easier to go. So they can't say I'm really stupid and I don't know what this is. Go, oh, well, it must be aliens because I don't know what it is. So it has to. You know what I mean? I think that's just an easier thing for people to say than admit that they're dumb.
Right, and then, well, the other thing too is I'm sure they hate to think that it can only be in the Mediterranean, because everybody wants to think that there was an Atlantis at other places of the world, and therefore, whenever they find a strange place, they find an archaeological dig that has things they don't understand, they quickly want to say, "Ha!" You know, and if you're trying to do research, you're trying to get funding, you're trying to get noticed, you got to use the word Atlantis, right? Because if you don't use Atlantis, you're basically going to shoot your project in the foot. You use Atlantis, you get it spun up on some news site, all of a sudden you get the attention you need to make it go to the next step.
Yeah, I have read, you know, people talking about Atlantis being off the coast of Ireland, you know, out off, you know, like the pass, you know, off the coast, west coast of Africa, Indonesia, you know, the Antarctic, all these places, but you don't give any acknowledgement to any of those. You're saying 100% just based on what Plato was talking about. It has to be round about Santorini.
Well, I see kind of two sides of that, right? Because who even knows if there was a real Atlantis for Plato? You know, maybe he was kind of throwing out this model idea. And so, yeah, if that's the case, there was no true Atlantis that he wrote about, and that it was basically a folklore when he wrote about it, then quite possibly there are Atlantises around the world, right? There are these model fits of an advanced society. If they were a true Atlantis, then yeah, you can't give them any consideration, because back in that day, they barely knew what happened out in the Atlantic. You know, they didn't want to get out past the Strait of Gibraltar. So
because it's a very different as well. Talking about seafaring, very different traveling around the Mediterranean than going out into the North Atlantic with the boats of the time.
Right.
Especially as you're saying, if you know, with Atlantis being a trading centre.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense that they're heading out through the Pillars of Hercules, heading out through the Straits, and then heading into the North Atlantic and running into those North Atlantic storms and boats that were essentially designed for an inland sea, which is what the Mediterranean is.
Yeah. Yeah, and you look at the boats of that time, especially the shipping boats, you know, lucky if they had sails and oars, but they were basically open bow to basically allow you to pile up supplies. And so they weren't set up to be out past any giant ocean system. So any guy or any person that's crazy enough to try and go for it probably didn't last very long. And didn't come back to tell about
it. Do you? So as a you know, do you see there being like a connection between you know, Atlantis and it seemed to be that people went to Egypt to learn? Is that something that you kind of put together as well?
Yeah, so that was just a supply route. So again, we're talking about a hub of commerce. And so before the eruption, we would definitely see, you know, pottery and other supplies that are going to these kings over in Egypt. And so if you're getting supplies from these areas, you're definitely going to see them on these tombs of, you know, these kings that were getting these, you know, sourcing these supplies. And then any kind of an eruption, you know, basically the Mediterranean is the backyard of everybody. So you get a decent eruption. For one, you're going to blanket the whole area with an ash cloud. It's going to make the area go dark. It's probably going to give you a nuclear winter, you know, and so the growing season is going to be short. And then you're also going to get giant tidal waves. You know, you're going to get these surges of ocean if you're near a shore or up a river. And so, of course, not only did it make it there with the supply route and with the humans, but I'm sure they got about an hour's warning before their own lives were greatly affected as well.
Damn! If only If only the Library of Alexandria wasn't burned, we'd have all this information.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean,
yeah.
scientifically, with isotopes, we can uncover most of this stuff still, because there are some, some source or some hint down there that we could get all that information back. Not exactly what we're happening on a human scale, but naturally, we could tease out everything that went down.
Talking about a nuclear winter and the impact of the earthquake, sorry, not the earthquake, the volcanic eruption. Just talking Krakatoa, I'm sure I read that even as far away as it does down in Indonesia, there's evidence of it in the British Isles, where we're from, that there was almost that nuclear winter for a couple of seasons. They've seen it in soil samples, that the growing season was a lot shorter and there was localized famines. And you think if that was from, Southeast Asia to the United Kingdom, then certainly something like Santorini blowing up would have caused, major issues right across the whole Mediterranean basin.
Yeah, so that's the big thing. And I think that's kind of the showstopper for humans. We talk about how personally we're causing this greenhouse effect and we're ramping up the temperature of the earth. All we need is a super volcano, and COVID's got nothing on us compared to what a giant eruption would do because of these nuclear winters. And we're seeing it now with COVID. We're so globalized now that we screw up one part of our shipping or our supply and everything else is shut down. But if you shut down the northern hemisphere of the Earth's growing season, we've got some serious issues. And so we would have seen that during a Santorini eruption or Krakatoa, where you literally need to shut down one growing season. Right now, with our population scale, there are going to be a lot of people hurting. And I think that's kind of the next big thing. You get a big eruption and all bets are off. And it's to kind of explain how that works. It's called a nuclear winter because the first people that figured out that would do such a thing were nuclear scientists. So the idea was, back when we were doing the Manhattan Project and we were talking about bombing in World War II, people were thinking about, wait a minute, if you set off a detonation of that size, basically eject dust and other things in the atmosphere that act like a big umbrella, what happens? Well, you do it hot, you do it big enough, and you literally shield the earth from getting any sun. You do that, and in the summer it drops into a winter. You do it big enough, and you can shut that down for something like 10 years. And it's not just ash, it's even things, sulfur-based stuff. So sulfur binds with water, and that forms this aerosol that will not come out of the atmosphere for tens of years. And so that's when the idea was coined, this nuclear winter. But really it comes down to volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, anything big, and you can shut down the earth. And so just look at the dinosaurs. Ask a dinosaur what it was like, and you'll get an idea.
Yeah, because one of the theories is that's what the Gulf of Mexico is, isn't it? It was the massive asteroid impact that caused the dinosaurs to go extinct.
Yeah, it was an impact. We did a show on it, so I always know too damn much when I've done a show. But the asteroid came in low, aiming northward, and so when it hit the Yucatan Peninsula, it shot basically these liquid rock BBs around the entire world that literally caught everything on fire, and also sent a tidal wave, hundreds of meters tall, that washed on all the shores. But those little liquid rock BBs, and I swear, I will bet my life on it, made their way all the way out to the moon. And so the impact not only caused a nuclear winter, but it caused all these incendiary BBs to travel all the way around the world and catch everything on fire. So the ultimate warfare done by one rock. Yeah. And so they found a layer of these. They found a layer of these around the entire world. It's thickest right around that Yucatan Peninsula, but they find it all the way on the opposite side of the earth. So it kind of tells you that scientifically it happened.
So you've been down to the Yucatan.
Yeah. So the cool thing is it created this impact so intense that it caused a ring that you can still see in the gravity. So if you scan the area of gravity, an anomaly or a difference makes a perfect circle right off the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula. And it's in that circle that you're getting all these areas of basically dissolution of the carbonates. And so these sinkholes also form that same perfect circle. And then you follow that trajectory, and then northward from there, you see the debris basically all the way northward.
Oh man, science is so cool.
It is, yeah.
Science is so cool.
It's wild to think that it managed to throw it all the way across to the moon's surface, though.
Yeah, but it has to. I mean, think about it. If you're throwing ejecta to the opposite side of the Earth, the moon's not that far, right? So if you can throw something on the other side, you can easily throw something out to the moon. Especially if you get it, you get it far enough out of our gravity, and it's going to wrap over and land on the moon.
So one of the things that I had read about the Yucatan asteroid was that the explosion would have created more power than all of the nuclear weapons on Earth at the height of the Cold War.
Oh yeah. Easy, yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. And I should, to talk about nuclear power, I saw a talk a few years ago where there was a scientist that modeled a nuclear eruption now. Because you got to realize this idea of a nuclear winter took place back before we had technology with nuclear devices. Mm-hmm. And this person modeled the size of a nuclear warhead that we don't even have anymore, really. It was a very small nuclear warhead. And I forget the estimates, but it was something like the nuclear winter would cause a die-off of something like 25% of the human race. One warhead that we don't even have, it's so small. So it's pretty scary stuff. Hopefully people realize what we're playing around with when we have these fearless leaders around the world threatening to do such things.
Yeah. Whew. Crazy.
Sorry.
Crazy.
When it comes to the good news.
Yeah. As a geologist then, and talking super volcanoes, Yellowstone.
Yeah, so when Yellowstone went off, I forget the last time, a lot of these times I don't know. So I'm throwing out ideas, but it was around 100,000 years ago. When Yellowstone erupted, it covered, and I'm not exaggerating, pretty much most of the western U.S. with ash. Like here we're in Tucson, we find an actual layer of when Yellowstone went off in the past. And so same thing, when Yellowstone went off, everything probably closely went extinct. Everything big went extinct, or anything that really demanded a growing season. So, and it's a hot spot. The cool thing about Yellowstone is you can actually see where it's been tracking from, across the U.S. And it's literally burning its way through the crust, burning its way through continental crust, which makes it even more explosive. Hawaii is a hot spot, right? But there you can walk right up to a lava river. Worst case, they have a lava fountain where you got to stand back a few hundred feet, But in Yellowstone, you want to get away from that eruption, you better go down to southern Mexico.
Is that something that you are concerned about in our lifetime?
Well, I mean, how can you be concerned with something you can't do anything about, right?
Yeah, but you don't because you always see, there's been tremors around about Yellowstone. Is that just media stuff, or is there?
No, it's going to come true, but it's kind of like a doomsdayer. Like if I sat there and prepared for a year's worth of food, I'm just going to suffer for a year before I'm dead. I want to just be taken out, gone.
You're going to be like Woody Harrelson in the 2012 film. You're going to be up there in your RV on a radio show.
Yeah, I've got this military 5-ton, and I'll just be driving straight towards Yellowstone.
Oh man, that's going to be funny. Yeah, it's actually quite between super volcanoes and asteroids.
That's what geologists. When you look at the geology time scale, the Earth is 4.55 billion years old, right? And humans have been here for literally a split second of that. I mean, it's insane how short we've been here. But as you learn geology, you also learn that extinction is the rule. Like from what we see on Earth today, that's about 0.001% of what's ever lived on Earth, maybe even less. The fossil record's incomplete. But the rule is that we're all going to die. As a species, personally, 100% success that we're going to die. And so as a geologist, you learn to just look at it, enjoy it, study it. But at the end, you realize we're all dead. So figure out what you can before it's your turn,
It seems like it's one of those things. The way 2020 is going,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, nothing would surprise me anymore. You know, we
Well,
started off.
as a geologist, I'm not worried either, because like COVID, you know, I bet you it's going to be hard to find COVID in the fossil record. Although, like George Carlin said, we will leave a thick layer of plastic. You know, top layer on the Grand Canyon is going to be the human plastic zone. But something like COVID, we're not going to probably find a trace.
No, totally. It just seems like it's been such a crazy year so far with, you know, you cast your mind back even just January, you know, Australia was on fire, and then we've been talking nuclear weapons. There was that, remember Iran, and everyone was worried about World War III, and then COVID came along. And
the killer hornets were there.
The murder hornets. Did you have the murder hornets in your area at all, Martin?
Yeah. I hope they get here to Tucson. I'm excited. So I try and get stung or bit by everything, so I was kind of excited about the idea with that.
Do you guys have...
What's that?
Sorry, did you say you try to get stung and bit by as much as you can?
Yeah, so before geology, I was a biologist. And so when I was younger and dumber, I would pick up rattlesnakes and tarantulas, whatever, like tarantula hawks, everything. So this was before, if YouTube would have come about 10 years earlier, you know, I would have been filming all these stupid things I used to do. But yeah, and I'm not exaggerating, there's at least 30 times I should not have lived.
Oh God.
And so like for instance, the airplane part back there, that was flying an ultralight into a thunderhead. Dumbest thing I'd done that year. And I mean, it flipped me over and threw me out of the bottom of that cloud so quick. But then for my PhD, that was, and I'm not exaggerating, that was about 40,000 miles on a dirt bike motorcycle for 7 months in the dead of winter of South America. So I got caught in blizzards. I had guns to my head. I got ran off the road 5 times a day. So yeah, I'm surprised I'm still here. I wasn't supposed to.
This is a crazy existence.
Yeah.
So who put guns to your head in South America?
That happened 5 times. So the craziest one, I'm not exaggerating again. The craziest one, because I'm, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, I'm cheap. I don't want to pay for anything. So 7 months it was a Honda XR 400, pretty much stock, but I chopped it up in this shop. So in this shop, I made it have a stiffer suspension. It could carry 400 pounds of gear. And I made it so I could literally take it apart because I planned on getting stuck in rivers, in sand, you know, doing crazy treks. And so I would just be in the middle of nowhere, sleeping in a ditch by myself. And it just didn't look normal to the locals. And so in one place right outside of Buenos Aires, this ranch owner called the cops and turned me in as a cattle rustler. And so 5 cops come. And I wake up in the ditch to all these guns on me, and I'm like, "¿Qué pasa, amigos? You know, what's up?" And they're like, "We heard that you're a cattle rustler," and I'm like, "On a motorcycle?" And they laugh. And I explained what I was doing, and actually that night I'd scared off the cattle rustlers. I didn't even know it, but at about 3 a.m. these people were cattle calling, you know, "Sui, sui," and I stood up, and I said, "Why, okay?" And they were like, Hefe, boss man. And they took off. And as thanks, the damn landowner called the cops on me. But my guys, the way I was kind of out of trouble is I'm a photographer also. And on part of my website, I would take nude photographs. And I had business cards with nudes on them. So there's all these macho Argentinian cops. And they're like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I'm a photographer. I take nudes," and I handed them all my business card. And they looked at him and they're like, "We got office work. We got to get back to the station." So they took off. Yeah. So yeah, that was a pretty crazy trip. But the funny thing is, they were leaving. They actually invited me to stay the night at the police office so I wouldn't be out in the mud. So that night I stayed at their place. Yeah.
That's cool as anything.
Jesus,
but yeah, there was 5 times on that trip I shouldn't have lived. Like another time I got caught in a blizzard on the southern tip because our summer is their winter. So negative 18 degrees. The road was about, you know, a few centimeters of ice. And then another blizzard hit. and I was going through hypothermia. Like I called my dad on a sat phone. I said, Dad, I don't think I'm going to survive this. And I was crying. And he's like, oh, shit. Well, if you're alive tomorrow, call me and I'll let your mother know. If you're not alive, I'll let somebody know, you know. He's like, where are you? And I'm like, I'm in the middle of nowhere, man. I haven't seen a car in days. And so after I got off the phone with him, and I was shaking, and I was convulsing from hypothermia. I couldn't get my camp stove started to make a heat, you know, to try and stay warm. That night, I'd been wrestling my bike in the ice, so I got sweaty. So the night before I went to sleep, I took all my clothing off full of sweat, and it froze into a ball of ice. So there I was, just curled in a ball, about to die. The only thing I could do, and this is pretty disgusting, but, you know, why not tell you everything now? I got the stove taken apart. Turned out there was a little drop of water at the jet, you know, so it wouldn't let the fuel in. So I got that out, put the thing together, barely, you know, shaking. Everything was frozen, including my alcohol, you know, so I couldn't even drink myself out. So, and everything was in plastic Nalgene bottles, so there was nothing I could do. So I got the stove working, and the only thing I could do was boil my urine and defrost my clothing to get it on. And so, completely boiled in urine. And I went to the next, I didn't realize how bad I stank either. And I arrived into the next gas station, and they kicked me out. They're like, we have never smelled something so horrid. Get out of here. Yeah. So I literally had to push on to the next gas station just to get gas.
Oh man, that's amazing. I mean, I know the worst thing that I've ever had to do, nothing like that, is you know, swimming in the sea or swimming in a loch and your wetsuit, and you have nothing else to do except for, you know, pee yourself. You need to pee. You have to pee yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And that's quite disgusting. But I have never had to, you know, boil my own pee to defrost my clothes.
Yeah, the new body warming technique.
Yeah,
that's a different level. So why did this trip happen, Martin? Why did you?
That's a good question. I don't know why anything in my life happened.
It's the only question.
Dude, I'm not exaggerating. I fall through my life backwards, and when I fall on my back, I look around and go, oh, this is interesting. So to kind of answer that question, I was literally traveling the world trying to die by some sort of Darwinian, you know, the Darwin Awards. I was trying to somehow make the awards, but I was just trying to do crazy stuff. And I started a listserv. So I had about 1,000 people on this email. And I did stuff like, I worked in Papua New Guinea. You know, I had machetes to my throat doing dumb stuff there. You know, parts of the Caribbean, parts of Mexico. And a professor here actually said, you know, basically I need somebody as stupid as you to try and collect sand from every river in the world. And so that's kind of how that started. And so South America was going to be a litmus test. I was single. I said, I'll collect your sand, but I want to take photos and I want to do some crazy stuff. And he's like, done. And so basically the sat phone was to just check in with him and be like, you won't believe what just happened this time, you know?
So Papua New Guinea, there was machetes to your throat. What happened there?
So I took a job sight unseen. That was another stupid one. Sight unseen. It was a dive resort, like world's best dive photography kind of thing, because I wanted to be the next Nat Geo photographer. And so just by luck, I was selling photos, and I had about 40,000 in gear that I bought from selling photography around the world. So I took the job. The job was going to pay me like $1,000 for annual salary, but I got Sundays off and free use of their dive boats. And so I was working like crazy on the weeks to then go off and do underwater photography. But the job was site manager. And in Papua New Guinea, they don't like white people because the Brits, you know, squashed them. And so I would basically do what I did in the past by just trekking through the jungles. And there are a couple times, you know, they are very furious about protecting their land rights, their own land. You know, the locals are always at war. And so there were a couple times where I would just kind of come into this village as some big, tall, stupid white guy, and their first instinct is to put a machete to the throat, shoot and ask questions later. So I was like, whoa. So I only lasted 6 months at that, and then I got this horrendous stomach bug. And yeah, so I came back for a little bit and regrouped, and then figured out the next step.
Even 6 months is a very, very good effort.
Trust me, dude. By the time they sent me home, I was fetal position, man. I was fetal position on the airplane. And then first thing back here in Tucson, I went to a doctor, and I was like, I don't know what I have, but I can't even sit up. And the doctors are like, we don't do tropical diseases. This is a desert. And they're like, what we're going to do is we're going to prescribe you every kind of parasite killer, antibiotic. And by killing everything in your stomach, we hope we can get it. So it took months to a year to try and get over that bug.
Jesus.
Yeah. But it was a good time, you can't argue the experience.
I love the fact that you're just so casual about it. Like, oh man, this one time these guys in Papua New Guinea tried to I've knifed to my throat, and it's just
living. If you're not about to die, then what's life about?
Yeah, that's true. I have done a couple of running races where it says on the entry form, there is a risk of death in this form, and people say, why would you do that? And you go, seems kind of fun. seems like a good idea, but I'm not going to Papua New Guinea to trek through jungles or anything like that. But yeah, that seems like fun to me. But yeah,
as a biologist, though, because that's what I was before geology. Like the biology there is second to none. Like the rainforests, all the way to the coral reef. That's in the coral reef triangle. So like we would dive down and you'd look through the different coral lattices. It's just insane. So one of the fewest places on Earth where it's got the least coral bleaching. That's where they're trying to save first. But like, I would go back in a heartbeat, even if it meant shipping me back in a box again.
That sounds. Any plans? Any plans to head back or?
No, so I have kids now. My wife doesn't want me dying, so I've simmered out of it. The one thing, stupidly, I bought a giant sailboat last year and brought it home, and she wasn't very impressed. It was a 10-meter, decent-sized boat, and I've brought back some really big, stupid things, but this boat really didn't win me any points at home.
I was about to say Arizona's pretty much landlocked as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's gonna be tough to put it somewhere. So the idea was to, yeah, I don't think things through, man.
Clearly.
The idea was see if we're comfortable on it and then find water, So, but we're not there yet. Our kids are young.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. What happened with the Thunderhead and ultralight? Then
So,
how did that end up happening? Where you
this is funny. This
will
will just show you how stupid I am, because I taught classes explaining cloud dynamics, but I was in the air, and these ultralights or microlights, I don't know what you guys call them, they fly slow. Like they fly maybe at most 40 to 50 kilometers an hour. And so you're at the mercy. You're just shit paper in the wind, essentially, when you think of something like big winds. And so I'm flying along, and I'm right at the ceiling. And I'm thinking, oh, the cloud starts above the ceiling, where you see the base of the clouds. I didn't even think that, wait a minute, there must be an insane updraft below that. It's just the humidity isn't there yet, So I'm bored in the middle of the desert, and I just start flying towards one. And I mean, it shot me up, and then it flipped me over and shot me down faster than free fall. And luckily, it's got a 5-point harness on it, or I would have been done. I would have fallen out. But it was insane. It was like there was a big paw that just spit me out of the bottom of this cloud. And so I was kind of falling into the ground, and luckily was able to get it right side up, landed it, and then I was like, all right, I think we're going to sell this one and play it safe. But the funny thing is my instructor, I didn't realize this, but people around here that do ultralights are pretty crazy. You know, a lot of them have crashed and they keep going into the air. My instructor is one of these crazy guys. Like, when he was showing me how to fly, we had an engine out on takeoff, which is, I had a friend die doing that essentially. Because, you know, you have this angle like that, and there's really no way to get aimed down. It just stalls out and hits the ground. So he quickly salvaged us. We went into a couple bushes, and I asked him, I said, how many of those you been in? And he was sitting there counting for a while. And he's like, 24, I think. And it's like, why do you keep doing this crazy shit? So, you know, once he taught me how to fly solo, we'd have a monsoon season with, you know, 40, 50 mile an hour gusts. And I would go out to take off in that weather. And he'd come up and be like, what's your problem? Do you want to die? And I'd smile and he'd say, all right, go ahead. Off you go. And I'd take off. Yeah. So, I got to the point where I was soloing. I didn't get my actual paper license, but after a couple of those stupidities, I realized I shouldn't go forward.
What do you do to relax?
Lately I started meditating. That stuff's powerful. That's about it.
This is what's amazing about doing these podcasts and having conversations with people is they never go the way you think that they will go.
Oh yeah.
They just never go the way you think they're going to go. It's amazing.
The funny thing too is, you know, like when I've been pitching myself to do these different shows, they are hiring you on the show to be something that the production company is putting together, right? And so a lot of times they'll hire me as a geologist, but then try and put words in my mouth because they've tried to form a script.
Yeah.
And I'll show up like you guys are seeing now, like just a crazy nut job, you know, goofball. And they'll be like, no, we're not doing that. You know, we want you to be a serious geologist scientist. And so what people see on TV is maybe 1% of reality. And then I start talking to people and they're like, geez, you're nothing like I thought you were on television. It's like, right. They're paying me to be some fictitious character. So I'll be the serious scientist.
See,
So,
this is all making sense with the first email when you replied to me emailing you, Robert, when you replied, Robert Martin, don't know where Robert came from, but saying, as long as you can have a laugh and have a joke,
right.
you were, and that totally makes sense now with what you're saying.
Yeah, because if you're not having a good time, it's a waste of time, right?
Yeah, well, that was our whole point of doing this in the first place, was to have fun. And the people have asked us, you know, how do you do it? How do you write a script that you want to run through? And me and Ali say, no, we have some basic ideas that we would like to talk about, and then fuck it.
Right. Best way to do it. And that reminds me, I just went to a really cool workshop here at the university. It was on improv. The title of the improv workshop was Yes and. Because I see myself as a yes person. Like, I've been teaching these classes where a student will come up and ask to do the craziest stuff. And I'll be quiet, trying to think to myself, how can I say yes to this kid trying to kill themselves? You know, because to me, it's kind of endearing. And then I saw this workshop and I realized that a person that can walk into any situation ready to say, yes, how can I make this? How can I facilitate it? Is the perfect scenario for like your guys' talk. You know, your talk show here. You guys are the ones trying to say yes and to keep a conversation going and make it exciting and to build on itself. So you can't script that. You got to just show up, ready to say yes. Let's make this happen, and that's when life really takes off.
Yeah,
definitely.
We said very early doors we didn't want it to be so, and now we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to ask this, and then we'll ask this, because it becomes too structured and too rigid, and there's no way we'd have got half of the stuff we've had from your good self if we had tried to go down that route, because it works when it's a natural conversation. You let people just talk and share what they want to share. It works so much better.
Yeah,
no, it's better. It gets dangerous. It's almost like you guys are like a counselor. You just want to tell you more.
I'm just still intrigued by the picking up rattlesnakes. At which point did that seem like? I know we've now spoke about other things, but Chris hates snakes, which is why I mentioned it.
Snakes.
But at which point do you think I'm going to pick up a rattlesnake?
So, to kind of give a backstory, I've always been a critter guy. You know, like as a kid, I was catching everything. You know, my parents luckily would just let me bring home anything, and I had the house had tons of wild rats that got out from my pockets. You know, mice, lizards, snakes. So ever since I was a kid, if I saw it, I wanted to touch it. I wanted to try and pick it up and hold on to it. And so when I was in college, my swim coach, same thing. You know, he had a Savannah monitor that was pushing over a meter, 1.3 meters. And so he was the one that instilled even more reptile collections with me. So I had a Burmese python that was almost 4 meters. And there were times where and the cage was our entire house. And a Burmese python, when it has to take a shit, sometimes has to constrict itself or it gets constipated. So there were mornings where I woke up choking because my snake was trying to use my constriction to take a shit. And so I had a lot of crazy pets. And so a rattlesnake to me was no big deal. And I learned to watch the behavior of these guys. Like a rattlesnake that's not rattling isn't going to bite. And so there were times where I would pick up a snake that was cold and it would just hang over the stick. And so I'd look at it, it would look at me, and I realized there's no issue here. And I would literally hold it because I was warm. This rattlesnake would just wrap around my hand. You know, it was a really sweet situation. So there was a couple I did that with where I would just hold them. And then when they got warm enough to bite me, I'd put them on the ground and let them go. Yeah, but same thing, like here in the desert, you get wild tarantulas. Let them crawl over your hand, and if you pick your hand up, they're fine walking around. And, you know, it's almost like there's a psychology there. If you don't mean harm and you show that you're just, curious, inquisitive, a lot of these critters are just as curious. And
yeah, I've got a friend that lives in Arizona. He's from Scotland, but he's moved out there. He's moved out once, came back, and has now gone back out. Chandler, Arizona.
Oh yeah, that's just north of here.
Okay, and he said he worked for a while as a personal training instructor, and he said one of his jobs, because he was the new guy on the staff, was to go out very, very early in the morning and sweep rattlesnakes off their artificial tennis courts, because it was that hard rubber. It held its heat more than obviously the surrounding area. So at night it would come out the desert and lie on. But the problem was, because it kind of kept its heat better, they were already kind of a little bit bitey by like 6-7:30 in the morning when he would have to go out. He would literally be there with like the broom, like an 8-foot broom, just sweeping rattlesnakes off. And he's put a couple of pictures up just recently, because as he moved back tail end of last year, and he puts up pictures of rattlesnakes in his garden like all the time, just like, oh yeah, this one got in today, I had to move it. It's like, no, just move the house, don't move the snake, move house.
Yeah, like they'll let you know.
Tell you.
So I got bit in the foot once when I was a little kid because I thought it was a lizard and I jumped towards it and I stepped on it and it bit me in the foot. But luckily it sank into the shoe more than my foot, so I didn't get poisoned. But yeah, my parents, I had a weird childhood where my parents would just kind of hands off. Like, they were there, but I'd come home all excited. I just did the dumbest thing ever. They would just be like, yeah, so it just continued.
Yeah. Oh my God. I
That nerve-wracking point where you're holding the rattlesnake going, once it gets too warm, I'm going to put it down. When do you know it's too warm is now? Let's put it down.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've had some snakes, and they're wrapped around, obviously cold. I forget what it was. I think it was a amethystine python, but it was smaller. And it was wrapped around my arm. And then I don't know if it was bored or what. It just started chewing and digging its teeth into my arm. And that's when I was like, all right, tink, rip the thing off. It was getting, it was definitely through the skin. But, this stuff, I used to run field trips down to Mexico for a class, an oceanography class. And literally, I would show the students everything that could bite or sting or anything. I'd show them on my hand. So I would, I'd show a little octopus chewing in my hand, and I'd explain what the venom felt like as it was either like a bee sting or making things go numb. And I'd touch, these giant fireworms that would release toxic glass tubes. I'd let them get in all my fingers, or, lick a sea anemone, watch my tongue swell up. So, yeah, pretty exciting classes. Word gets out when you're a nut job lecturer.
So one thing, I mean, I'm terrified of snakes, but I have to know what happened to the Burmese python.
So this was back in college. So once I was graduating college, what do you do with a 4-meter python? There was one time it actually bit me hard. Like when they're shedding, their eyes cloud and they do not want anything near them. And so I walked by it. It was in the kitchen. I mean, it was taking up the entire kitchen. And I walked by it when it was shedding, and it didn't know what I was, and it bit me across the back of the whole leg, like the back of my calf. There was like 60 puncture wounds. And so that was about the time I was like, all right, let me get rid of this thing. So I donated it to some sort of little petting zoo. They didn't let me pet it. But, I gave it away to somebody that would actually not kill it. Because in the States, a lot of these pets, they have to kill them because they grow so fast. That thing was growing almost a foot a month, depending on how you pet it. Yeah, because they get 10 meters long. So
Jesus.
It was kind of like, what do you do with that? Yeah.
And it literally had free reign of your apartment or house. It just roamed about.
What do you put something that big into that's humane, right? So the funny thing is I would take that thing swimming. I'm going to run us out of time with stupid stories, but I used to be on the swim team. And the head coach did something where I wasn't very impressed. I kind of had a chip on my shoulder because the head coach did something. And I got to the point where I was our fastest butterfly swimmer, both arms.
Yep.
So I knew they couldn't kick me off the team. And I was like, game on. So one of the things I did was bring this python to swim practice. And I would have it like swimming down the lane with me in my, the rest of the team got out. They were like, this crazy fucker brought a 10-meter python, And then the game was over. It took a shit. I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. It was about 0.3 meters. It was an entire rabbit condensed into a shit. And so when nobody was looking, I tried to throw it into the gutter, but they found out. Kicked the snake out. So then my next crazy stunt was I went to the feed store and I got a baby goose. And I taught this goose how to imprint on me. So it thought I was the mother. And I brought the goose to swim practice. And the goose would swim right behind me the whole time. Like I would turn, go under it, and it would turn around and then go the other way with me down the pool. So I got to be known as like some nut job with all these pets that would come to practice. They called me Dr. Doolittle.
Yeah, Dr. Doolittle, totally. I just love the fact that we've just hit episode 20 and we've had a goose story on the Silly Goose Gang podcast. So thank you very much for that. Nothing else.
Oh my God.
That is unbelievable. That is incredible.
Yeah.
I didn't think we would get to the point in the podcast where we were talking about pythons taking a shit in a swimming pool. Like if we had said at the start of the episode, that's where we would get to at some point. I wouldn't have believed how we got there.
We specifically said let's get Martin Pepper on. Let's get the Atlantis guy on for episode 20. It'll be a really good episode. 20 is a nice landmark. We'll get in and we'll get a really cool guy on. And here we are talking about python shitting in the pool.
Always digress.
Better than I could have hoped.
Oh man, that's hilarious. Where do you go from there?
You name it, I'll go.
I didn't have a segue for that. You have these ideas in your head about where could this go? What can we talk about? Atlantis and the ancient Greeks and Egypt, can it ties together? I have nothing for python shit in the middle. I don't have anything for that.
Yeah. That was unbelievable. That was amazing. That was a genuinely good.
The funny thing is, and this is kind of related, but my coach became the head coach. And then they made the mistake of inviting me to a swimmer party with the coach, kind of like one of his like career celebration parties. And he pulled me aside before I went into the house. And he's like, don't share any of your effing stories, dude. You will get me fired. He's like, the stuff you pulled off will not go by nowadays. Because that was back in the early 90s.
Yeah. That's
like the Python and you know, that's pretty tame. But those were some good times.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, that's I'm glad that you know that these times that you know me and Ali grew up before you know camera phones and all this kind of stuff, so you could get away with doing some pretty crazy stuff back then and not you know not get in trouble for it.
You hear now, like you go to some of these functions and you know they've got to confiscate all the phones just so the performers can feel at ease.
Yeah.
So that nothing bites them in the butt later. Yeah.
Yeah.
It happened. My daughter was at a Ariana Grande concert, and they had to put their cell phones, or mobile phones as we call them, inside these little bags that stopped them working.
Yeah, the Faraday bags. Yeah.
Yeah. So they couldn't use them at all for videos, photos, anything like that. Which is, I'm so glad that we did all that crazy stuff pre-social media.
Well, yeah, and you think about like improv even, and that, you know, the idea of something biting you kills any improv. So, you know, this podcast is going to probably ruin any of my future careers. Thanks, guys.
No, I'm sure you'll be fine. Yeah, no, we did things when we were kids that were crazy, and I'm glad that we didn't have any video evidence. You know, just stupid stuff. You know, a couple of friends, you know, we'd tie a sledge to the back of a car and drive, you know, 20, 30 miles an hour up the main road and try and slide the, you know, I mean, just there's no video evidence of it. Can you imagine getting caught by the police now, towing a sledge up the road at 30 miles an hour? You would be in so much trouble.
We used to.
Yeah, luckily my stuff was always just self-harm stupidity. Probably one of my best was all the kids would get together at my house and I would soak my shoes in gasoline and then they would light them on fire and I'd try and dance them out. But I actually tried to dance flaming feet out. Yeah, that was epic.
That is pretty funny.
I've never done that.
No. If you want any hair on your legs, don't do that.
Oh, Jesus. That's,
glad it happened all way before the social media kicked in.
Oh, God. Yeah, we're very, very lucky. Especially, you know, just like you're saying with the you know, the improv stuff, you know, you can't, you know, comedy is going to be killed because, you know, you can't joke about anything at all. And you have to explain if you're telling a joke and it's slightly controversial, you have to say, okay, this is a joke. It kills the whole thing. You know, it's quite sad. So yeah, we're lucky in our era when we grew up. It's funny because, you know, I know. So I drive a lorry for a living, Martin, and one of the girls and one of the places that I went to said, you know, there's a guy who works who's a friend of mine in the garage, and said, oh, do you have any videos of, you know, Graham from when you were younger and you were going to nightclubs and all this kind of stuff? Well, no. Like, well, why not? I was like, well, because we didn't have camera phones. And they went, what? So, you know, you had to physically take a camera, take a picture, take the film to be developed,
right,
get it back 3 or 4 days later, and they're just looking at me going, what kind of Stone Age shit is this? And like, that was the world. You know, this is a different, you know. We couldn't go, oh, look, cool.
Yeah, back when Kodak was big.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the big. I've also seen ones where, like, you know, a 3.5-inch floppy diskette, like you would have used in a computer. And I've seen them handed to kids, because I've got teenage boys, handed to, like, mid-teens. And they're like, whoa, someone 3D printed the save icon. And it's like, no, that's what we. And they're like, what? And I saw one, and it made me feel so old. Someone said, I don't get how did people mix CDs? You know, I used to do CDs of all your favorite tracks and burn it. And they're like, I don't understand how you used to put music on a CD, like how, like CD burners. And they're like, but I don't get what that means. Just like, I was like, yeah, you used to make like mixtapes back in the day.
Yeah.
And
I don't know about you guys, but I used to listen to the radio with my tape, you know, cassette
100%.
ready to record. half of my
Try to
music
miss
had a
advert.
commercial at the beginning.
Try to miss advert. Yeah, that was the real thing.
You'd be
Oh,
screaming
man.
if the DJ came in and going, that was number 13 in the charts.
Exactly.
Damn it, you've ruined it.
Ruined it.
Yeah.
It's ruined.
Oh man. So
It was,
have you do you have any crazy projects lined up, Martin, or is it, anything that you can share?
Like, before kids was a different life. We now have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and right now the goal is to just keep them alive. Some days it's harder than others.
It's a good goal.
I have a buddy. Have you guys heard of it's a farming group called 4-H here in the States for kids?
Yeah.
No.
So 4-H, they like when you go to a state farm, 4-H is a kid, you have like a rabbit or a goat or something that you're raising, and then you enter it in the 4-H, to be the best goat in the county kind of thing.
Okay.
And I have a buddy who's a big time rancher. His family goes back when they homesteaded Arizona, way back early 1800s. And he has a bit older kids than I do. And we both have kind of a ranching background. And he turned to me and he's like, how's it going with the kids? And I was like, pretty good. And he's like, to me, it seems like a 4-H experiment. But if the critter dies this time, you go to jail. Like, that's about, some days it feels like that, And the problem is now you guys know how stupid I am. Like, my daughter will be ready to jump off the top of the house, and I'll just be back thinking, how are we going to make this happen? And the mom, or, my wife will be like, stop! What are you, crazy? And I'll be quiet. She'll be like, don't answer that. Being a father right now is about the craziest thing.
Yeah. It is when the best thing I've ever heard about being a parent. I've got 3 kids, 2 teenage boys and a 10-year-old daughter. My boys are 16 and 17. It said the aim of a parent is to give your children just enough childhood trauma to make them funny and interesting.
That is it.
And to be fair, I've heard Ali's dad jokes. That is enough trauma for anybody.
I mean, kind of same bad humor and sick humor. When I was working on one of these shows, the sound guy turned to me and he's like, if you don't want them to go to college because you can't pay for it, just crush their spirit. I was like, ouch. I don't know. That's kind of funny, but not really. Yeah, it's my biggest challenge right now.
Yeah. It's incredible watching them grow up, though, isn't it, as they start to develop personalities.
Yeah, and for me, it was a metamorphosis because, like having kids has made me such an emotional, I can cry now at anything. Before, I wasn't into anything. And now my daughter does something cute and I'm just like, oh God, look at that. It's amazing. It's totally flipped my life around. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's cool. It's I suppose there's there's nothing crazier than real life, I suppose. I don't have any kids, but I've got a niece and a nephew that I'm the crazy uncle, which is good fun. I get to do all the crazy. I get to do all the crazy stuff, and then say, "Okay, take this thing back. This is crying. Take it away."
Yeah.
So I've got a niece who she will be 3 in a month, and she loves to climb. She loves climbing things, and I just encourage her. So she wants to jump, and I'll say, "Do it again, but let's move the couch a little further back, and let's jump a little bit further." And everybody else is kind of going, "Oh," and I'm going, "Yeah, it'll be fine. I'll catch you." Yeah. And I'm the crazy uncle, so I like that part. But I like saying it then. Dispose of this.
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah. So that 3, we got a 3-nager as well, and they make things crazy. Same thing. She jumps off of anything that's high. The crazy thing though is like I'll be laying on the floor just stretching or chilling out, and she does like a full jump and lands on me flat like a full stunt man. She'll knock the wind out of both of us and think it's hilarious as we're both like, so, and I just support it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely support it. Yeah.
How many of these stories are you going to tell your kids as they get older then?
I've already started telling them.
Nice.
My wife isn't too impressed with some of them, as you can tell. We haven't set up, hard boundaries of what stories won't be told, because she's already fearless. She's already climbing on the roof with a ladder at 3. So I think, my better judgment is growing, but it's still not there yet. So yeah, we'll figure it out as it comes, I think. But the key, right, because I wouldn't have done half this crazy stuff if my parents weren't supportive. My mother was really good about, like you were saying, staying out of the way. And so that's our challenge, especially as a father. I'm sure you see these other people where they're like, oh, don't step in the puddle, or, like everything is controlled now. And my own motto is parents should be seen and not heard, flip that thing around. Where I won't reprimand unless she's going to cause permanent bodily harm to her or somebody else.
It's funny that you mentioned jumping in puddles, because when my niece was, I think she was maybe 2, and she was just, as children do, she was jumping in a puddle, like quite a deep puddle. So I just went, I'm going to start jumping in the puddle with her. And so me and her were just jumping in this puddle. And they could see like other people going, why are you an adult? Why are you jumping in the puddle? Like, yeah, it's fucking fun. That's why. Yeah, I'll just go home and put my clothes in the wash and it's fine. I don't want, you don't say, like you say, no, don't jump in the puddle. You'll get wet. Yeah, you'll get wet. It's fine.
Yes, Neil deGrasse Tyson tells a really cool story about that, where he was watching a kid about to jump and the parent was like, don't, you'll get dirty. And Neil deGrasse Tyson said, right there, you killed a future scientist. Because that kid was going to turn that into an experiment, and they were going to learn about physics, and they were going to learn about, cause and reaction and everything. And by trying to keep that kid clean, you've just just changed their future for the negative. And that nails it. You don't know what your kid is thinking when they're going to do some of these crazy things. By saying anything, you're changing that.
Yeah. It's a cool way to look at it, actually. Yeah. It's a cool way to look at it. Yeah. So what are we on? What we're on time, Ali?
Just gone an hour 15.
Oh.
Yeah. Cool.
Should we push on?
Are you okay? Are you okay with time?
You're the guest.
Yeah, I can go till my phone battery dies.
Well, you better look into the back catalogue and get these stories ready then.
You better get the questions then.
Yeah.
So what's your favourite trip? What was your favourite trip away? Or should I say craziest trip away?
Yeah, they're all kind of crazy. They're all like children to me. Each one of them was crazy for a different reason. The motorcycle trip for me was the first time that I've kind of dove into something with no network to save my ass. Everywhere else I had a connection, or I wasn't going anywhere far. So the South American trip was really like, I had done some things almost with a personal faith that things were going to work out. And that one was just like, I'm going to throw the dice. I don't know if I'm going to survive it, but I know I'm going to enjoy it. Papua New Guinea was because I was working in the Caribbean and a guy had just come from that. And so he put the connection together to get me there. And for that was the biology and the geology. That place is the most geologically active in the world. And so, for that place, it was the natural wonders. And I've done other trips where it was just, to push my own mentality. How far can I take this? I was just telling my wife the other day that I worked in Baja California at a sea turtle research camp. And I was the guy that kind of kept tabs on all the volunteers that wanted to do ecotourism. We were catching sea turtles and measuring them and then setting them free. And there was a kid there that was like 10 years my younger, but just as crazy. And so for that trip, that research trip, my favorite part was when we actually found this old derelict boat that I could get running. And we literally motored straight out to sea with the intent to become lost at sea. Trips like that was like, throw yourself out there. The engine now is completely dead. How are you going to get the 15 miles back out to, back to land? So a lot of these, and anybody watching this, I have found that no matter what you throw yourself into, whatever you want to call it, if you're religious, if you're not religious, you are surrounded by the means to get yourself out of that hook, that problem. And so as a kid, I always found my mentality can get me out of issues like MacGyver, And so as I've gotten older, I've challenged myself even more. Okay, you think so? Let's try this. Let's try this. And if I fail, I'm dead. And so it's been crazy. I can't tell you how many times, if I was a religious man, I would have to say, God just saved my butt. If I wasn't, it would be, okay, the circumstances were correct for me to rig this thing up. Like when we were when we were like 10, 15 miles out to sea, we had a shade that I was able to rig up a sail, and we were able to make a dagger board and actually sail ourselves back to back to land. So for me, it's the joy of these trips of when you think you're dead, you go, okay, well, how are we going to get out of this? Let's think about this. Let's have some faith, and let's make things happen. And so all these trips have just literally been to kind of strengthen my faith and something out there that allows me to keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, so you like the problem solving aspect.
Yeah, totally MacGyver. Like an interesting trip. My wife wanted to go to Hawaii, and I was like, I don't do hotels because when I swam, we stayed in 20 hotels a year. I hate them. I don't want to sleep in a bed that 50 people have had sex in and 3,000 people have slept in. So I prefer to sleep in a ditch. I'll literally sleep under my truck before I'll sleep in a hotel or under the motorcycle. So my wife was like, I want you to go to see her family. She wanted me to go see her family in Japan. So she's like, let's stop off in Hawaii and check it out. And I said, no hotels. She's like, so what am I going to book? I was like, no reservations. She's like, where are we going to stay? I was like, ditches. And she was like, man, why did I marry you? So we show up. We wanted to go to Kauai, the little island, And so we were hiking down the street, and back then I was telling her, if you have the faith, just stuff happens. So we were hiking down the road, and this guy stopped us and said, where are you going to stay? And I was like, no idea, sir, but we've got a tent, a sleeping bag, or a hotel, whatever it takes. And he goes, oh, then you got to stay at my buddy's banana plantation. And I was like, where do we go? And he's like, go down the road, dead end. You can camp wherever you want. So we set up a tent. That guy comes home, sees us strangers in a tent in his front yard, says, what, you better tell me a good story. So I had a few. And he's like, you got to come in and stay with us. So then they had us stay in their house. He's like, hey, we have a cabin on top of the island. Let's go for that tomorrow. So we went to the top of the island. Now we have a cabin overlooking the entire island. They gave us their car to drive, and they gave us a whole list of things that we had to see before we left. And my wife at the end of that trip was like, I don't know how the fuck you do this every damn time, But unless you're willing to let go of that branch and free fall, you're not going to know what your life can have, And that's where I'm stuck right now, because I have the 9 to 5 to pay the bills, to feed the family. But my wild side is saying, let go of that branch, dude. You've done it a million times. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if we get out there again.
Do you know the thing? At least you can, because me and Chris have spoke about this in a few different podcasts. At least you've got those stories and those experiences banked. Because we've talked in the past, like me and Chris are both quite lucky that we both enjoy most of what we do for our job. And it allows us to do some cool stuff on the outside, and we both go to jiu-jitsu together. But there's a lot of people that aren't, and they're stuck in that 9 to 5 permanently, and they don't have any experiences other than, I suppose, as you're saying, that 2-week holiday to, wherever you guys go. Like for us over here, it's maybe go to Magaluf or Benidorm in Spain, go to the kind of next nearest hot country and spend 2 weeks in an all-inclusive resort, eating British food, drinking the same beer that you drink back home, but you're just doing it in 30-degree temperatures and then going back to the 9 to 5 grind. So even though you're saying, you still want to let go of that branch, at least you've always got that reserve that, okay, I'm doing this just now, and there's a means to an end, as you say, you've got family and bills, but you've got some incredible experiences, sat in the back there, Martin, that'll keep you going for a long time, I would imagine.
Yeah, but you know, it's like once you've seen the other side, it makes it hard to go back to being leashed, you know? So there are days at work I'm thinking, man, it would be nicer to be stuck in a muddy ditch than, you know, be working in a lab or pushing paper. So, you know, there's two sides to it.
Yeah, you can always go back to that when the kids are old enough. Back to that wild existence. I know.
Yeah, and luckily my dad had the wisdom. When I was doing all this crazy stuff, he's like, do it now before you're too old and you don't have the physical fitness, you know? So a lot of my friends are starting to retire, and it's like they're asking me what I would do, and I go down this list, and they're like, "Oh, I can't do that," you know, because who wants to sleep in a ditch, you know? And I'm like, "Oh." So, yeah. When do you want to live those experiences is the big question people should be asking themselves. Now or do they want to maybe die and not even have those?
Yeah. No, it's certainly. I'm all about having, you know, cool life experiences. I'm lucky. I'm unattached, no kids, so I can still, you know, look at the weather forecast on a Friday night and go, it's going to be good this weekend, and go, I'm going to go to an island in Scotland. Just going to go to one of the islands and go climb some hills and do some exploring and stuff. I'm lucky enough to be able to do that, and it's cool.
You better do that more and send me pictures, damn it.
I have some pictures of sunrises, sunsets from the top of the mountains in Scotland that are incredible. I'll send a couple to Ali and tell her to send you them. Some of them are amazing.
Thank you.
Some super cool pictures in Scotland. So yeah, I'm lucky enough to do that. And you know, like, you know, we've talked about this a couple of times as well. I've done, you know, marathons in France, and, you know, been to Holland for jiu-jitsu competitions, and we're supposed to be going to Iceland next month for a jiu-jitsu training camp, but that's now cancelled. That's not happening because of COVID. So, yeah, I'm lucky enough to be able to still do these things. Go, fuck it, I'm going. I'll be back in a week.
I'm jealous. Yeah, if I did that, I don't think I'd have the job.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to be able to do those things. But yeah, so I mean, how do you look at people when when people are doing the 9 to 5 grind, they're sitting in traffic every day, because I mean, when I speak to people sometimes and they have nothing to say about it. Nothing. I mean, I have a million stupid things. Usually when I've been drunk, when I've been on holiday, and silly things have happened. And, but you speak to some people and they're like, oh yeah, they don't have anything to say. They just 9 to 5. They go home, they watch telly, and they do nothing. Did you just look at that and does that just hurt your head?
That's a good question, and that I've been getting into deeper philosophy now that I have time to think a lot, since I'm not trying to kill myself. And I realize that we all have the dinosaur brain. We have all levels of hierarchy of thought, and I see a lot of people that either what they're born into, they didn't have the support, their dreams died young, that they feel that's all that they can do. And so I kind of feel like they've almost not attained their highest consciousness, and you just see people that they haven't pushed themselves. They haven't had the opportunity to. They haven't had the parents to support that. And so I look at that and just, I recognize it. If I think I can inspire those people and get them out of their comfort zone to actually start living, I will. Like podcasts like this, I hope some people watch this and they literally start a personal mantra. I'm going to let go of that branch and I want a free fall kind of thing. But a lot, the sad thing though is the Western society is be that brainless drone, make the money, spend the dollars to support an economy. You know what I mean? Like, people are so lost in the lifetime earning goals and complete bullshit around money and comfort that, to me, I kind of sadly see those people as lost. They're gone. They haven't taken those few chances to truly live, and so they're literally like a robot going through the steps every day and then sitting their butt on the couch almost like a robot sits on a charger to do the thing every day, repetition after repetition. It's those few people that dare to dream that are going to change the world. And those are the people I want to be surrounded by. Those are the people, and I'm sure you guys have seen this. When I'm traveling, I don't know what it is, but I can literally look in the eyes of a person and see that glimmer. You know, I can see a person and instantly know this is we're on the same plane. You know, I've seen people where I don't know if it was a previous life or what, but it's like, you're my brother, you're my sister, you know, and we hit the ground like we haven't been apart and we just met, you know, and it's those adventures that I want to surround myself by that aren't kind of that lost cause. And, you know, I hope to inspire the ones that aren't there yet. I hope to hang out with ones that are there to kind of build a synergy to really kind of start a wave of free thinkers, because it's those people that are not only going to live for themselves, but also help other people live and help us get over all these issues, from racial crap to pandemics. You know, I hope that we can all come together and all start living and all start enjoying every hour of our lives. But it just takes those crazy ones to start it. You know, it starts podcasts like your silly Goose to inspire everybody around them, to get people off their asses and live for that life that they always dreamed of. So, you know, that's all you can do.
Yeah.
That's I can't. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
And I think, you know, it takes me back to what's the Brad Pitt movie? Fighting.
Fight Club.
Yeah.
What's that? Fight Club.
Fight
Yeah.
Club. Yeah.
When he puts the gun to that clerk's head, you know, and he's like, "What's your dream in life?" And the guy wanted to be a doctor or a veterinarian or something, and he was like, "If I find you back here in a year, I'm going to blow your brains out." You know, and there was this issue there between him and Tyler, like, how dare you do that? And his point was like, I just gave that guy his life back. He is no longer going to live that rote routine, because he knows now his life hinges on him living his dream. And I think a lot of us need that Brad Pitt in our own mind, putting the gun to our head saying, I'm going to pull this trigger if you don't do exactly what you dreamt of doing before you chose that normal job.
Yeah. I think it's driven by fear a lot of the time. And as you were saying at the start, Martin, you know, having a supportive network, not just of friends, but of family, and particularly parents, obviously, when you're younger. Like you were saying, that kid that's about to jump off the bench and is told, no, don't, because you'll get dirty, sore, wet, whatever it's going to be. If you hear that often enough, it must dull that spark that you need the metaphorical gun to the head to kick it back into high gear. And certainly hearing stories like, you know, the ones you've been dropping on this podcast is definitely, you know, it's inspiring. It's awesome to hear.
Yeah. Well, and if anybody's listening to this podcast and they have a dream they haven't lived yet, and they want to know if they can even, you know, head towards a dream. Because I used to give talks to kids that wanted to travel the world, but their biggest argument was, I can't afford it. You know, these kids that had the time, but they didn't have the money. And I was like, you know, all these stories I've told you about, I haven't paid a dime. And, you know, so I would tell these stories, and the first kid would be like, okay, how do you do that if you don't have any money? And I was like, who said I paid a dime for everything you've heard? I've either figured out how to get somebody else to pay for it, like these research trips, or I figured out a way to hitchhike my way there. And when I've been in these places, sometimes I've been totally homeless, digging through the trash. And so these people that are afraid to leave a job to pay for the apartment and pay for the utilities, I challenge you, if you really want to live a dream, why don't you be homeless for a little while and realize your biggest fear is not a fear at all. You know, being homeless for some people is complete liberation. You know, when I go to the parts of Tucson with the homeless people, part of me is jealous. You know, not for the ones that have psychological issues or other issues, but I know some people that are homeless by choice that are traveling the world. You know, they're hopping trains, they're hitchhiking, and they're doing things that everybody else can't do because they're trying to pay that utility bill or they're paying the mortgage. So anybody thinking they can't do something, if you realize how comfortable it could be to be homeless in paradise, you'd be there right now. You know, just like my story about Hawaii. Like, you can go anywhere you want. If you have a dream and you can get people interested, they'll pay for you to go there. If you can't, you can do it homeless. So there are no excuses.
Yeah,
that's really what it comes down to. It's just, it's Brad Pitt with the gun to your head. There are no excuses.
Yeah. I know Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller did that. He went homeless. He left his house at like 14, 15 and literally travelled east to west, west to east, just by hopping trains and doing street performing. And he said it was the most liberating thing he ever did. It was where he learned how to work a crowd, do his act, have literally no one stood. And I've heard him on a podcast where he talked about the trick he used in every single town, east to west, west to east and back again. How he used it to build a crowd every single time, so we get enough people stood around that he can make $50, $60 to then allow him to move to the next town to do $50 or $60 to move to the next town. And that's how he spent the first 3 years of his late teens, early 20s, was he was literally homeless, and he made himself homeless by choice, and his parents totally supported him in doing that.
That's cool. Yeah, that gives me chills, the idea of it. So there are no excuses in life. And I'm learning now, there aren't, what happens in your life is not by mistake either. Lately we've gone through some really hard times. Our 2-year-old daughter just got type 1 diabetes, and it shattered us, because your life now hinges on 2-hour cycles, 24 hours a day, measuring blood sugar and treating with insulin. And, this happened a year ago. And with a kid that young, you're just, you're cursing God and all these things. But now we find it as a blessing. And so there are no accidents. Whether anybody wants to believe they have to stay in that job and be miserable, the time that you jerk yourself out of that, it's not an accident. So it's time to start living and make everything by choice. No victims, No victims, no prisoners. Live your life exactly how you want it to be.
I think it must be an awful thing to get to the end, be lying in a hospital bed all full of tubes and stuff, and just go, fuck, I didn't do anything that I wanted to do. It must be a terrible, terrible, terrible feeling. Or maybe it isn't, because you have lived that way and you don't know any better. So maybe it's not all that bad, but it seems like an absolute waste of, if you think we're going to maybe live to be 80 years old, you've maybe got 60 years where you're really functional, maybe another 10 where you're not too bad, and then 10 where you're not good. You don't have a lot of time to go and do things. So I am not as extreme as you, Martin, but I certainly kind of try and do what I want to do and have fun with the whole thing, and just silly things like I had for our jiu-jitsu class we have the traditional gi that you wear, and I had a white one, and I made mine's tie-dye. Ali will know this. I made mine's tie-dye, and people would say, why did you make a tie-dye gi? And you go, because it's fun.
Right.
He's like, why not? And people kind of look at you like you're a bit mad. You go, no, it's funny. 35 years old and I made a tie-dye gi. What about it?
That's awesome.
It's just good fun. So yeah, I'm not as extreme as you by any stretch of the imagination, but
you're just smarter. That's all it is.
I'm definitely. I was
basically, that's the only time anyone's ever said that.
I am not smarter. I'm not smarter at all. Definitely not. But yeah, it's this feels like a nice place to sign off now. At the end of this little life lesson here, it feels like a nice place to sign off. So
we've just done 100 minutes as well, which is more time than we were expecting to take yours, Martin. So we genuinely appreciate it.
Sure, I'd love to do it again.
Super good fun. Yeah,
let me know if you guys are interested for more chats. This time I'll get some alcohol and we'll really get the stories flowing.
That's what we'll do. The next time we will have some beers and we'll get crazy. That's what we'll do the next time.
Perfect.
But yeah, we'd love to speak to you again, Martin. It was awesome. Thank you for your time. Didn't go exactly how I thought it. Didn't go at all how I thought it was going to go. It was way more fun. Way more fun.
Just before we do sign off, Martin, we always just ask if people are looking for you on social media or anything. Where can people get in contact? Where can they find out more about you? Any of those kind of platforms?
Yeah, so I got Twitter. It's Marty Moose the Third. So MartyMoosei. I got to share more on that. I have a YouTube channel as well. It's called Dr. Martin Pepper, and it's the same as my Gmail. What else? That's about it. I don't do the Instagram, or lately I'm not doing anything, but just trying to pay bills. So I'm kind of living against my own motto these days, but we'll get back to it. So that's pretty much it. Twitter or YouTube.
Cool.
And I'm going to actually get more active because I did some really stupid stuff that I filmed. So
I'll look forward to that. I'll subscribe to the YouTube channel as soon as we get off air. So
cool.
Yeah.
We'll post it as well on our notes when we share our YouTube in the next few days as well. So hopefully we'll send some people your way as well, and hopefully they enjoy it as much as we've enjoyed the chat.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Martin. It was a real pleasure.
Absolutely.
For me as well. And we're going to do this again soon. I will find you.
Yeah, definitely. We will definitely do it again. Definitely. We'll get alcohol and we'll have some chat. But signing off episode 20, Dr. Martin Pepper, thank you so much for your time this evening.
All right. See you later.
Ta-ra.